You're watching Forget Being Cool.
Here we go, yo. Here we go, yo. So what's the scenario?
Welcome to listening in, the place where music checks in.
Hi, Josh.
Hey Dave, how's it going?
I'm hanging out here listening in the number one music hotel where people check in with us.
Yeah, only because there aren't any others that exist yet.
Right. Nobody else had a brilliant pun idea for a show.
Ah, puns.
So we listened to an album, Josh.
We sure did. One of my favorites.
Oh, jeez. Here we go.
Here we go, yo. Here we go, yo. So what's the scenario? Here we go, yo. Here we go, yo. So what's the scenario?
Maybe the only track on this album I liked.
Well, we'll get into it. For those of you that have not heard for those of you that may not be as into hip hop, this is a group you want to start listening to.
Oh, I disagree. So tell me about the album, Josh. Tell me why you picked it. Let's get into this.
The album I picked for this week, as you guys saw, is, of course, A Tribe Called Quest's seminal sophomore album, The Low End Theory, released in 1991. And this was at a time when hip-hop was starting to become predominantly more gangster rap influenced. But that was mostly on the West Coast scene. But on the East Coast, Jay-Z was still a few years away, but you had a lot more conscious hip-hop. You had guys like Native Tongues, Leaders of the New School, Brand Nubians, and of course you had A Tribe Called Quest. And their first album, People's Instinctive Travels in the Paths of Rhythm, you had a lot more of that Afrocentrism that had cropped up a lot in the East Coast hip-hop scene, but especially with the Low End Theory, they used a lot more prominent production. They combined rock, jazz, and hip-hop samples, and the fact that on this album they used legendary jazz bassist Ron Carter. So this is called the Low End Theory for a reason. You really feel the bass on a lot of these tracks, and it's one of my favorite hip-hop records of all time. And the fact that here we are nearly 30 years later, and from top to bottom, this still holds up.
Oh, Jesus. I think it sounded... I'm going to offend so many people if you love this album so much. It sounded to me like somebody commissioned them to make the most generic 90s hip-hop album we could imagine. Because when you say 90s, 90s hip-hop, this is what I hear in my head. This is the definitive... I know it's older than that, but this is that... the drums feel the same to me on every track that I listen to. The rhythm is the same. The pacing is the same on every track. And to be 100% honest, I never got anything out of any of these tracks. Never any deep meaning. And maybe you're going to explain something to me here in a second. But anytime we say, here we go, yo, here we go, yo, I just get into this God, that's so generically basic. There's a track on here that feels like they're just giving shout outs for the entire track, and I know that that's a thing that they did, but I don't appreciate it nor care. And maybe it's because I don't know the genre, I don't know the history, I don't know who these people are, but I didn't entirely dislike my experience with this album, but I wouldn't put it anywhere near the top of my bar for hip-hop. And I know that Jay-Z comes around later, and Eminem, and all these other things that I enjoy probably better do. Josh, you look sad. Tell me.
Well, first off, when you say that this apparently is what reminds you of 90s generic hip hop, I'm like, I would have thought more of the G-Funk sound coming out from around, the Dr. Dre production of around that same. This is right before The Chronic comes out, and that ultimately is a landmark album in and of itself. But I really enjoy this because of the conscious lyrics, because Phife Dawg and Q-Tip have this great interplay, and of course, Ali Shaheed Muhammad on the turntables is always a welcome feat. Plus, the fact that the mixing on here is done so well. I mean, there's a reason why the Bob Power, the mixer for this album, the engineer. He called this the Sgt. Pepper's of hip hop albums, and it just flows together so well.
Oh,
and
jeez. No, every track ends so abruptly. Every single track. I feel
that's
like
why you need Apple Music, because you have actual gapless playback, only $4.99 if you're a student.
So you're telling
Anywho,
you're telling me that Apple Music treats the tracks better than Spotify, where it doesn't ever feel like it stops.
I'm just saying that while Spotify does have a gapless environment, I feel like it does, being where if you're listening to it on, you're listening to it on something that's not necessarily an iPod or a computer, where it has to take a couple seconds to load the next track. Yeah, it's gonna feel jarring. It's gonna feel like you're taken out of it for a moment.
Oh.
So we should probably start getting into the actual wordplay that's going on, because there's a lot of really neat topics on here. Of course, you have the opening track, Excursions, which is basically Q-Tip sort of talking about how the group sort of came to be and where they were at that point in their careers. Back in the days when I was a teenager, before I had status and before I had a pager, you could find the abstract listening to hip hop. My pops used to say it reminded him of bebop. I said, well, Daddy, don't you know that things go in cycles, where the Bobby Brown is just amping like Michael? It's all expected. Things are for the looking. If you got the money, quest is for the booking. Now, of course, that's not the whole verse, because I don't want any of this to get demonetized. But the idea is that basically the fact that at that time, if his father is comparing how hip hop was at that time to how it reminded him of bebop, how it was all crazy and experimental, and he didn't really get it, but he as a youth he probably would have liked it when he was his son's age, and so that's what he's saying. The fact that Bobby Brown is basically just sort of dancing and having fun with stuff, just like Michael Jackson was. So the idea is that, and you can definitely see how pop culture likes to celebrate 20 years in the past, how it was the 90s celebrating the 70s, the 2000s, the 80s, and so on.
It's funny how it's how nostalgia sets in. It's always that 20-year gap. That's why that you and I have nostalgia for things like Game Boys and stuff. Like, it's because that is our era, and now we've
Some
grown
more
up.
than others, yeah. That's the thing with this track. It's basically just a lot of you're shouting out to the fans for getting them this far, and then there is that Afrocentrism in here. Listen to the rhyme, because it's time to make gravy. If it moves your booty, then shake it, baby. All the way to Africa, aka the mother hand. Stick out the left, then I'll ask for the other hand. That's the right hand, black man. Only if you are noted as my man. So you get the Afrocentrism, you get some black power in there as well. But
I will say this: it never
rap promoter is kind of
it never tries the black power thing too hard, which I appreciate as a non. I'm a white person. Let's just say it how it is.
And references went theory to the Zulu Nation, which for those that don't know is a group that was started by legendary DJ Africa Bambaataa, which was sort of, let me make sure I have facts here. It was the Universal Zulu Nation, because I know there were a few hip hop musicians in the 90s that were a part of this. An international hip hop awareness group which strongly promotes that hip-hop was created to provide peace, love, unity, and having fun for those in the ghetto, and eventually onward to all those supportive of the culture. So,
my favorite track on the album, by far, Josh, and I'm curious how you're going to feel about this, is Show Business.
I was going to get to that, because there were two songs on here, Rap Promoter, which I was going to get to, and Show Business, which sort of course, look at, being, young artists trying to make your way in the music industry. I mean, that's always going to be complicated, even now, even though this is 20 years in the past, or 25, almost 30 years at this point and stuff. Some stuff has changed. Young artists still don't get the greatest deals, but Rap Promoter is just basically pointing out how much rap music gets monetized in the music industry, and Q-Tip's just trying to warn up and coming rappers about certain venue promoters and that they'll be really shady. There's that line on here, industry rule number 4080, record company people are shady. I think that was 4080. But yeah, Show Business, the features, you got Lord Jamar, Sadat X, and Diamond D, and they all contribute solid verses. And there are some really clever references. Of course, on this album, you have, Phife Dawg on a lot of his raps. He'll throw in a line that sort of goes like blank, like something from a TV show or artist that influenced them.
Which is nice. It sets the date and the time when this came out, and that's important, I think. Yeah,
now the cool thing about rap about the rap game that is brought up in show business is in part of Lord Jamar's verse. You ask for slack and want to get cut loose from the label. Not able because you signed at the table for a pretty cash advance. Now they got a song and dance that you didn't recoup. More soup with your meal? Because this is the real when you get a record deal.
Tracks I don't like, Josh. I don't like what? And I don't like Infamous Date Rape.
Okay, I was listening to what earlier. The rhyme scheme, yeah, it's a little simplistic because it's just like most of it is what is if it doesn't have, what is if not.
Right.
But I really like that there's times where the beat kind of drops and Q-Tip is just sort of keeping the rap going on his own. And it doesn't come in at the exact beat you think it is. It comes in a little bit odd. And I like that. And, of course, chill for a minute, Dougie Fresh said silence. And the 4-second pause because that, like, it's what is hip-hop if it doesn't have violence? Chill for a minute, Dougie Fresh said silence.
I love how much you love this.
Violence at all.
I love that you love this so much that you can remember these verses the way that I remember the songs and stuff that I enjoy.
I gotta say though, you're not wrong about Infamous Date Rape, but the idea is that it's basically
I get the meaning. It's a
social commentary, just like,
right. And I don't have a problem with the actual meaning of the song. I just don't enjoy the beat and the rhythm. I also feel like the rhythm is consistent throughout the whole album, and maybe that's to its detriment, in my opinion.
I can certainly see that. I mean, I think there's also some really good storytelling on here that the beats kind of help to accent. Like on Everything Is Fair, that throws in a nice George Clinton sample to basically tell the story of this guy that basically gets recruited by this woman to do a whole bunch of dark stuff. Well, not so much dark, but like gangsta type stuff. But
I'm
the
gonna
fact
give this...
that she's able to like back it up because people don't suspect her because she dresses nicely and she is a woman who can do for herself.
I'm gonna give this album a real listen without the gaps, without the defined Spotify track gaps, and see if I feel less upset about the abruptness of the ends of the tracks, because that drove me a little bit nuts listening to the whole thing. I also felt as if the tracks that I do enjoy, like Show Business, would feel better mixed in with my library as a separate track than I want this entire album listened to back to back. And that's me versus Sgt. Pepper, which is your example here. I like to listen to
It's not my example. It's like that's
right. But
that's what it was.
But to bring it back to that is Sgt. Pepper, I like to listen to it in its entirety straight without anything in between, versus some of these
Which
songs.
is funny because it's the opposite. I feel there are some tracks on Sgt. Pepper's I could do without, and it would be better for it.
Oh, we're going to get to Sgt. Pepper someday.
One day.
But
we were talking about features on this album, and we were talking about songs we liked, and I feel that there's only one appropriate way to close out an episode talking about this album, and that is with one of our Tribe Called Quest's biggest hits, and essentially one of the best posse cuts in hip-hop, and that's the closing track on here, Scenario.
Oh, I knew you were going to bring this up, and I knew it was important to you. It goes on too long.
It's just so much fun, and you've got features from Charlie Brown, Dinko D. You got, of course, the real star Scenario, a then relatively unknown MC by the name of Busta Rhymes, who comes in for the latter part of the song and just salts the earth with his verse. That is pure fire.
I appreciate all the appearances. I really do. I think that brings a lot to that track overall. But and maybe this is why this doesn't fit in my library the way that you like it to listen to it straight all the way through, is where by the time I've gotten to that track in my fifth listen of this album for this show, I'm like, all right, good. The album's almost over. This song's going on too long. It feels like I've heard too much of the same thing for too long. And maybe that's me, and that's an opinion that I might not share with the entire world of the people who love this album, but I'm glad I got to listen to it, Josh. Thanks for recommending a cool album, a cool piece of history, something important that I should have listened to a long, long time ago.
Oh, no problem.
I'll add a couple of these tracks to my library, of course, as I always do. You guys can get those links and those playlists in the descriptions below, where you guys can listen to all the stuff that we're going to listen to in the future, the stuff that we listened to in the past. You guys can go on the YouTube channel and watch everything and go to forgetbeingcool.com. All that stuff down below.
Hey, before we go.
Yes.
Well, hang on one sec. I was going to end it with a simple, I think it was from Jazz We've Got.
Did you write your own? Did you write your own rap, Josh? You about to rap for me your own lyrical stylings?
No, I didn't have that much improv time, but I remember, this is a little bit of history. When I did some like music writing in my spare time, this would be about 6 years ago. I like wrote a review of this where I did give it a 10, and I basically ended it with a line from this song. I think, yep. All right, so thank you guys for listening in, and we'll catch you next time. And I'm gonna recite a line from Jazz We've Got. Of course, rest in peace to Fife Dog. So jet to the store and buy the LP on Jive RCA cassettes and CDs, produced and arranged by the 4-man crew. And oh shit, Skev Fansome, he gets props too.
For more great discussions, hit that subscribe button or visit forgetbeingcool.com.